This is Outside of New York, in-depth discussions with members of the art world who live and work outside of New York. And here's your host, Craig Gould.
Gabriel Dawe is a Mexican-born artist living in Dallas who utilizes miles of vibrantly colored sewing thread to create soaring installations that evoke a sense of viewing rays of light. The breadth of his work revolves around the use of sewing and materials to explore issues of pain, equality, and gender roles. But it's his highly popular Plexus series of installations that has garnered him acclaim worldwide. Gabriel obtained a bachelor's degree from the Universidad de las Americas in Puebla, Mexico, before moving to Montreal to pursue a career in graphic design. In 2008, he relocated to Dallas, where he obtained his MFA from the University of Texas, Dallas, and was part of the highly touted Centraltrak residency program. Over the last 8 years, Gabriel has installed temporary or permanent works in over 35 private and public institutions worldwide, including the Smithsonian Museum's Renwick Gallery, Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art, and the Amon Carter Museum of American Art, where his Plexus 34 is on display in the Philip Johnson Design Space until September 2nd. I recently sat down with Gabriel at his Dallas studio where we discussed his childhood in Mexico, his grandmother's influence, his life as a graphic designer in Canada, the importance of Centraltrak, experimenting with glass, and his discomfort with heights.
So where are you going next? Because it always seems like a bit of a world tour for...
Yeah, I should have been in San Francisco as we speak, but the client, it was for a private commission, and the client had issues with their permits. So,
oh wow!
So we had to cancel like the day before, and which I've never had to. I mean,
right?
Usually when there are private commissions that are on construction sites, like new buildings, there's lots of timing changes, and that's to be expected, but it's never happened. It's like
so is that like a residential commission or a commercial?
No, it's a commercial.
Right.
Yeah, it's commercial. I can't really say where it is.
No, I understand.
Right now.
I understand.
It will come out eventually, but I don't have a say of when.
Right.
So, but it should be rescheduled for August, hopefully.
Sure. Right. Exactly. Well, I don't know if you ever heard the story about David Cho, who is a mural painter, and in the early days of Facebook, Zuckerberg had asked him to come do murals in the headquarters in Menlo Park, and he did like 6 murals, and he's like, all right, man, so how much is this going to cost me? I'm like, well, it's going to be $60,000. It's like, well, it's like, man, would you be willing to take stock instead?
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I'll take stock. And after Facebook went public, the stock was valued at $200 million.
Oh my gosh! yeah, I've heard that story before, and those days are gone. I actually have a commission in Facebook in their headquarters, not headquarters, but I guess they're their New York headquarters.
Right.
And I didn't get
do they have like a regional one down in Austin now or something, or
an office? Yes, they do.
Yeah,
they do. What they do, it's really cool because they get local artists in each of the regional offices that they open, and they bring young artists, and so I think it's they call it an artist in residence program.
Right.
I don't know exactly how it works, because when they approach me, they, I mean, what I'm trying to get at is, because I did one in New York, and I'm obviously not in New York, and which is what the podcast is about. So now I don't know exactly how. Well, they have curators and they have a director program, and he's the one who spearheads the whole thing.
Sure.
But then, and he's the one who originally contacted me for New York, and I think right about then is when they transition to only get sort of the regional artists.
Sure. Well, I mean, you have to admire them for being willing to put legitimately, authentic art in those spaces versus something that they're, ordering out of Decor magazine.
Exactly.
Or whatever, right?
Exactly. And it's pretty cool too because, I mean, a lot of it is murals.
Right.
So it's it's really cool. If you go to their offices, sometimes an artist will take a whole area and, paint the walls and the floors or drill pieces of wood all over and do some sort of installation. So I think, if not all of it, most of it is site-specific.
Sure.
I was recently back in the New York office because they released a book of the artists in the residency program, and I was included in the book, and so I got to see a lot of the stuff that has come up since I was there last time, and yeah, it's pretty neat.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, Gabriel, I'm really very appreciative that you have been willing to sit down and
my pleasure.
Because I know how, like I said before, I know how busy you are, especially being a site-specific installation artist. You're always on the move, and so I appreciate you freeing up time when you're back in your home space. And so we're talking today at your studio space here in Dallas. What is this, like 1,500?
2,000 square feet.
Right. And, I think that was one of the first questions I asked you is, do you have a studio, right?
Yeah.
And so how do you, being an installation artist, how do you use this space?
I think it's mostly a storage room more than anything else, although I do envision doing a lot more work in it, more studio work. I do get to I do get to experiment in here a little bit. Usually when I do an installation, which, like you said, they're site-specific, so they're always done on site. I don't do maquettes, I don't do mock-ups.
Right.
I've done this sort of long enough that I have my system down.
Right.
But I do like experimenting from time to time. Before I had a studio, I would do the experimenting right on site. So I would just take a gamble, and it would usually pay off for the most part.
So do you do scouting missions? Like say a museum has interest in they've seen your work and they have interest in you. Do you actually go into that space
ideally
ahead of time and then come back here and kind of figure out, okay, I think this is what I want to do in that space?
Yeah, usually, the first thing is I get the email and we would like you to do, and okay, well, send me pictures of the space and we can sort of, and dimensions, and I can give you an idea of, or I can get an idea of if I can do something. And once I see the space and measurements and we want to move forward, I ideally do a site visit. it's not always possible, just because sometimes museums have limited budgets,
right?
Or they're they're around the world, so I don't always do the site visit, but it's always preferable to do a site visit.
Sure.
And once I do the site visit, it's just sort of taking in the space, and sometimes it's just spending time in the space, just feeling it out.
Sure.
A lot of times I just get an idea right in the space, and it's really neat when that happens, because it sort of everything falls into place.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes a lot of sort of ruminating about it, and just sort of, having it in the back of my mind, or sometimes just pondering sort of what feels right. And sometimes when that happens, it's obviously more challenging spaces.
Right.
But there's always usually a moment where this idea feels right, and then it's just a matter of sketching out for more than anything for the museum to see what I want to see, or the client. And there's a couple of instances where actually the sketching process actually gives me the idea of what to do as well. So it's always a little different.
Right.
It depends on the space.
Right. And so when you, is there a specific list of things you're looking for when you go in there, or is a lot of it at this point just really kind of gut feel for you? I'm assuming that there are technical specifications, like I need to know where we can anchor these things.
Correct.
But I assume that there's also you're probably also taking the light in the space into consideration. Or is let me rephrase. Is light a consideration? Because
light is very important for my work, for sure. It's not necessarily. It's not that it's not taken into consideration. But in a sense, what's more important to me is the architectural space,
right?
And what I can do in that architectural space, and like you mentioned, where can I anchor? Mm-hmm. And the light is what it is for them in most cases.
Sure.
There's very few instances where I have access to a lighting designer.
Right.
And when that happens, it's amazing. Like the Smithsonian had a lighting designer, and he was so incredible to work with. And he taught me a lot of things that can be done and how certain things can be done. But I don't have that luxury in a lot of spaces.
Right.
Museums have the light that they have.
Right.
At the Renwick, which was the Smithsonian, they had a brand new system with like the newest of the new. So that was really cool to be able to have access to and work with.
Awesome.
And he's been very gracious about advising me in certain projects. So shout out to Scott if he's listening. Because he's amazing.
Great. So so you grew up in Mexico City, right?
Yes.
And so, tell me about your childhood.
I feel like
you don't have to start like in that first week, but a lot of the artists I talk to, they seem to have a lot in common in how it all starts out. They seem to be a little compulsive when it comes to.
For sure, I had